we are living up to our global name and our global opportunity here today, because joining us is a Canadian today. She came all the way across the border 15 years ago. She lives here in Ann Arbor now. She, prior to becoming a founder, was a user experience designer researcher who was really well known, speaking at conferences and being published, for being an expert on human tech interaction, accessible design, and ethnographic research. She won the Catalyst of the Year award at the Global Entrepreneurship Summit in 2019 for the work that her company is doing. And she is another great example, just like last week when we talked to Carolyn and some of the other speakers, of someone who saw a problem in the world, experienced a situation that she thought needed to be fixed, needed to be addressed, and didn't just say somebody should do something about that. Instead, took it on herself. Her company works to help children who are in pediatric hospitals and going through different painful and elongated experiences there, forget that they're in that experience and be distracted and enjoy it and be able to have some fun and smile. Please give a hand to my friend, Christina York.
Hi, everyone. Oh, there's me. I took that photo 2 days ago because Eric's like, I need a headshot. This is one of my favorite sayings when I talk about the journey throughout my company. It's famous, I didn't make it up. You can attribute it to me, though, if you're tweeting about it. But it's the best time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, and you got a tree. The second best time is today. And that's what I think about when I think about building relationships in entrepreneurship. So if you guys had a chance to take a look at the website, you know we are an augmented reality company. We only serve healthcare, and right now we're only in pediatrics, although in the future that'll change. But the idea for us was to use really immersive technology to engage patients in a positive way. So maybe manage pain, distract from pain, gamify the hospital experience. So give them a game that gets them up and walking sooner after surgery. Give them a game that distracts after, if anyone's had surgery, you know how painful it is to wake up and that nurse going, come on, you have to walk to the bathroom. I don't care, let's go, let's go. So the experience for children, for anybody, can be overwhelming, but especially for children who don't understand. So we focus on creating really immersive experiences that help them through the healthcare journey. I'll play a 1-minute video, and I don't think it has any sound because I often use it at conferences. So our main product right now that's in market and is being studied is called Arise. Patient mobility is one of the 3 things that patients have to have. They have to eat, they have to go to the bathroom, and they have to move before they can be discharged after a procedure. And right now, nurses are the ones that have to cajole patients or monitor them, watch their movement. So we essentially created a game that's a cross between Pokemon Go and Animal Crossing, a character-driven narrative game with missions and tasks that they have to move between wall decals to be able to achieve. That's my 9-year-old doing this at home because we don't have a budget for marketing videos. So the games are immersive, but it more importantly collects behavioral data. So a nurse doesn't have to observe it, or a physical therapist doesn't have to observe it. They know how many steps they took, how long they were out of bed, what their pain level was during that time, so they can make better decisions around discharge. All right, so now I'm going to ask you, this is the interactive part. What relationships do you think we as a company should be building?
You can shout it out. You don't have to raise your hand.
Just shout it out. Healthcare providers, yes, 100%. Parents, yes. The patients, yes. Insurance companies, yes. Say it again. Software companies, yes. Healthcare workers. I don't know who said it, but yes. What about as a startup? What kind of relationship should we be building as a startup? Investors. What else? Yeah. Mentors. Yeah. There's a lot. And you guys actually named some things that are right that aren't on my next slide, so we'll see. So I tried to make a little ecosystem diagram. And I actually did this this task early on in the company, but we did it with sticky notes on a whiteboard. The first thing we did was sit down and really think in the areas that mattered to us most were, personal. Me as a founder, when I started the company, I was a solo founder, so it was just me. The relationships we need to have there, or I need to have there, the relationships as a company we need to have in the market, the relationships we need to have to grow the team or to grow the company, and the relationships we need to have to fund the company. There's some crossovers, right? SMEs are subject matter experts. It was too much to write in the box. And those are can be clinicians in our case. Could also be, other people who have started a healthcare tech startup who know how to navigate the system. Or a really expert gaming developer, right? That's a subject matter expert. So when we map out every possible way to build relationships around the company, it starts to feel a little overwhelming. But this is just the complete picture. I'll give you a look later what it looked like when we first started and what it looks like today at the end. But this is just to give you a sense of the types of relationships I had identified early on that I was probably going to need to build. It also requires a lot of self-awareness. If you're going to know your company, you need to know yourself first. And so I will say that I did spend a lot of time building my network out. I took some little shots from my LinkedIn, which, by the way, it says 500 plus. Let's just point that out. It's I'm super popular. I have 1,100. No, that's not a lot, but it is a lot to me. But when I started my startup, I had about 50. So this does represent something significant for me to be growing my personal network from 50, which was mostly friends that I graduated with, to people that really matter. And this was literally the order it came up in. Somebody at an accelerator here at U of M, love Angela, our lawyer, company lawyer, another founder here in town, a product development specialist at a hospital, and this guy. This is literally some of my top that popped up right away. And it was just an interesting cross-section of the different types of relationships that I had been building as an entrepreneur. And I did take a little screenshot from this is my infamous Star Wars notebook that I started the company with. It was just some cheap spiral ring notebook that had a Star Wars on the cover. But this was a self-reflection I did really early on of there's me, little stick figure, and what are my needs? And it's everything that I am not. And it was literally sitting down and thinking, I am not detail-oriented. I suck at the detail-oriented tasks. I suck at knowing certain things. I am not good at follow-through, And so these were the list of things that I was what should my team look like? And it was this self-awareness activity to say, I need to start building relationships with people. This was specifically for team building, right? That are like this. And because they need to complement, I can't hire another me as my first hire. That's going to be disastrous. We're going to get nothing done. We're going to have lots of ideas and never finish any of them. So that was a really interesting kind of moment for me personally. As somebody, I've been in tech for a little bit more than 20 years. I started writing really bad code. I became a user experience expert, and I worked in other companies for most of my career. And I got to a point where I was I can walk into a room, and I know I'm good at everything, in my subject matter expertise, right? I know I'm good. I have confidence. And when you become an entrepreneur, suddenly you are terrible at 90% of what you have to do because you've never done it before and you don't know how to do it. You're not a subject matter expert anymore. I'm not a user experience designer and researcher. I now have to create financial models. Who do I know that I could reach out to that could help me learn that skill or do it for me, right? So it became a journey of self-reflection at the beginning to understand which relationships I needed to really foster. All right, this first part is based on my experience and advice I would give to somebody. And then Eric will jump in with the very practical how-tos. A tough lesson I learned early on is that an advisor or a mentor is not forever. And in fact, if they're good at being an advisor or good at being a mentor, they have an expiry date because they're meant to get you or the company to a point that is at their upper limits, and then get you to grow to that point, and then pass you off to someone who can take you to the next point. There is no one advisor or mentor, perhaps, that could take you through the entire life cycle of a startup. And there are great people, and great advisors and mentors know this. And so I made a mistake early on, engaging an advisor who had a lot of expertise in areas I knew nothing about, so it was super valuable to me in that moment. And I gave up equity to that advisor, which is always a good idea, frankly, as a strategy. You have no money in the early days, but you have equity. But to do it in a smart way, and I didn't do it in a smart way. I gave up equity just to be my advisor, and I didn't structure it to say, you're signing on to be an advisor for 1 year or 2 years, and you're going to earn equity based on not just timeline, not just being my advisor, but on milestones, on having me or the company achieve something. And that's how you earn the equity. And that's super worth it, right? But if you just say, hey, be my advisor because you know stuff I don't, and oh yeah, sure, here's like 1% of the company. Later on, it comes back to bite you. You have to answer a lot of questions about that to investors or people who really care about your cap table, where your equity is in the company, right? So you should be planning for growth. You should be looking at mentors and advisors of like, what do I need now? What's my highest priority to get me to the next stage? Who can help me do that? And let's put a timeline or some structure around it. What do we hope to achieve? How can you help me? Are we having monthly meetings, like giving this definition? And how are we deciding if this was successful or not? Is it just you producing a template for a sales report for me? And then I can use that template. Okay. Or is it you producing a template for a sales report for me and doing 3 calls with me for the first 3 sales and like helping me find 3 leads and doing 3 initial sales calls with me? Like really thinking about what is going to help with your learning. And I think a lot of times people are willing to offer, hey, I got all this stuff in my Google Drive. I'll just throw you some templates. Or I'll share things that I've learned in the past. And a lot of it I learned was like finding people who are willing to truly get down and dirty and coach. Like, yeah, sit on the sales call with me. I've never made a sale in my life. I was fired as a barista. Like, I don't know how to do this. So that was a thing I learned. Later, I got better at it. I started creating agreements with advisors or mentors, like how to give it structure. What is our, how frequently do we meet? What are we expected to achieve in certain timelines? And what are the reward for achieving those things? And we're a lot happier as a company, and our investors are a lot happier with us in terms of like looking more like a professional organization. Now the trick is, where do you find them? So
well, hopefully I can help out, maybe tag team, yeah. If we can flip to the next slide, that'd be great. So to tack back to something that Christina was talking about a second ago, thinking about when you know yourself, and Kurt, our executive director, touched on this in his presentation earlier this semester, you have to know what your complements need to be. You have to know what it is that you're missing, that you're lacking, that someone else can bring to the table. And that really all drives back to why. Why are you trying to build a relationship? Why are you trying to build a new mentor on your board? Why are you trying to build a new advisor? Get down to the why. If we can hit click there. The answer to why is never, ever, ever, ever because someone told you, oh, you should go network. Oh, you should go to the networking event. Oh, you should go build some contacts. That means nothing. That's as useless as it sounds. Specify what it is you're looking to get out of that relationship, that attendance at an event, that situation you're trying to put time and effort into in order to actually extract the value you want. If we can hit the next slide. So, how do you do that? What do you go about doing? Couple tips and tricks that I end up using and I've used over my career kind of in business development, relationship management. I'll let you read them out. That top point is what I want you to come away with. Understand the need to triangulate the situation that you're going after, right? Industry trends, needs, and then the reasons that you're going out and otherwise pursuing those relationships. At the crux of those are likely the people who you want to build relationships with. The underlying text is how you can go about cheating your way to hacking the process to get there a little bit faster. There's only a 30-day period on that LinkedIn free premium. Use it very wisely. That's not a plug. They're not paying me. Okay, back to you. Oh no, back to me. There it is, recon and prep. Okay, so here's the deal. In order to go out and start building those relationships, again, as Christina mentioned, know what's important to you, know what you're looking after, look for the commonalities you have with these people. If I'm reaching out to someone and I know that they also love dogs, especially boxers, natural conversation starter, right? Easy point to kind of come off of. If they've spent time in Michigan, I can complain about the weather in the wintertime. I can talk about up north. I can talk about how great it is to go down to Detroit for Coney's or whatever it might be, right? Google News search, do not miss the opportunity to go into that conversation armed and equipped with something they don't expect you to have. You know information that SpellBound last week was awarded a $2 million grant from NIH because XYZ. She probably doesn't expect me to know that at all, and then I come into that conversation knowing that she immediately is interested in talking for another 2 seconds to me because of the fact that I look like I did my homework on it. Do the same thing for yourself. And again, before you start having those conversations, conceptualize what the plug-in opportunities are. Know what you want that person to do so that in that conversation, you can really kind of be like an opportunistic surveying mind through it to find the opportunities that when the conversation pivots and gives you a chance to say, hey, I'd really love if you have extra time next week to join blank or to help coach me on blank or to sign up to be this with us. Thank you, Christina.
I am super opportunistic all the time at events. I do plan, and I often search things like if I'm going to a conference where I know a lot of hospitals are going to be, I'll have a list of the hospitals that are, because conferences always provide who's attending, right? I'll know which hospitals are going to be there, and I'll know which ones are my top. Like I'll create a, I shouldn't say, we call it a not appropriate name, like a hit list. So I'll create this list, like their top 10 that we want to go after, and I'll really search their news feeds, all their social media, everything, and I'll have like 3 talking points for each hospital. This is how we got our first customer. I went to a conference that I knew Stanford Children's was going to be at. I managed to worm my way onto stage to give like a 7-minute presentation when I knew they would be in the audience, and afterward I approached the CIO and said, I know you have a large construction project going on, I know it's funded by this funder, and I know they lost a child to cancer. I have a solution that's going to help children with cancer. I need 15 minutes. It worked. We got our first customer there. Okay, so in terms of my experience, my practice, I commit every month. I actually budget my time because I'm a very disorganized person, so I need to keep, time management is difficult for me. So like, I actually block off Fridays as a way to, I went ahead, not that one, never mind, ignore that statement. I do that, we'll get it to the next. But, so I budget. So in the early days, I said to myself, you have to go to at least 2 in-person events every month, and they cannot be with the same audience at the same event. And I had prioritized, and I said, like, diversify, so I wasn't going to 2 investor events in a month. I could go to 1 investor event, or I could go to like 1 game dev meetup, or Girl Develop It meeting, or Wolverine Soft. I did in the past show up to a Wolverine Soft meeting with pizza and be like, I need people to help build a game for me. And so it's about being in tune, like reaching out to your network, searching of public events, meetups, stuff at the university here are even listed. You can find these things. And so I had forced myself to say, you have to do 2, and you can't be lazy about it. It can't just be 2 investor networking things that are happening at Spark downtown. And it's easy because that's where your office is. So I had to force myself to get out. Sometimes that meant travel, and when we were able to afford those things, that was okay. Sometimes it meant a virtual event. There is no excuse for not finding 2 events that you could attend, and it doesn't have to be local. One of the things, this is supposed to be a business card on there, when Eric was talking about like actually being there and like finding talking points, there's times when you're in conversation with someone, and if you pre-pandemic, it used to be a lot of business cards. Like when I would go to events, people would hand off business cards. And the first thing I would do when we were done our conversation, you go to move away to the next social group, and I would take my pen out that I always had with me, and I'd write, like key points on there. Talked about ski trip to Colorado. Like something I would remember that conversation. And then the thing that I think they could help me with, offered to intro me to this investor. And it was on the business card. Now, they don't always have business cards. So I had my notes app on my phone that if they didn't give me a business card, I was making a quick note, their name, who they were, and what they offered, or what I wanted to ask for later, and maybe one conversation point that was not about me asking for something. Hey, they told me they have 3 dogs or something. So when I went to write that follow-up email after the event, because events can be overwhelming, and you can meet a lot of people, and then I wouldn't remember, be like, hey, we met at this event. Remember talking to me? Instead, I'm like, hey, I had a great conversation with you. I really learned a lot about the type of dog you have or whatever, right? Or, hey, I was thinking about a Colorado trip too, or I just got back from Colorado. Those kind of things, where you can personally relate and then continue the conversation. It'll help them jog their memory too. So when you get a business card, or whether you're using, just taking notes, it's always good to add these little personal tidbits so you remember later. And I have stacks of these business cards. I'd like to think someday when they make the movie of the week about me, that there's a museum with all my business cards with the crazy notes I wrote on, woman with green hair, really brilliant about marketing, and just the little things I would jot down to kind of understand the beginning of relationships.
Hey, maybe, I could.
You have all these goals and things in mind, and then you're become a robot.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest mistake you can make, is not being human. So tag team Eric.
I'm so excited that you're hearing from Christina talking about this today, because I knew she would be the perfect source to talk to you about the tactical relationship management level. I didn't know she'd go into some of the stuff I was going to say, so forgive me for her stealing my lines a little bit. To her point about writing down on business cards after you leave that conversation, absolutely phenomenal. Keep track of those little tidbits. In terms of the interpersonal dynamic when you're talking with somebody, all right, we can role play, maybe we'll demonstrate. Okay, so if I'm meeting her at a conference, we're talking about this, right? If in the midst of my conversation, she starts pulling one of these, she starts, tensing up, or maybe looking around,
or
signaling for somebody else.
My feet start pointing away from you.
Oh, I've seen that one, yeah.
If my feet are not pointing to him,
No.
he's not interested.
No, yeah.
Stop talking.
Know when you lost it. Know when you lost the conversation.
Yeah.
When you lost the attention. And at that point in time, it's okay to let it die. Go on, find somebody else. Most importantly, be authentic. Be yourself. Don't talk to anybody you're not legitimately interested in. I guarantee you it comes across. There's no doubt about it in my mind. It's the same thought process for when you're on the phone. If you actually smile when you're on the phone, that literally comes through in your voice. I shit you not. Try it. Try it with your friends and see if they can pick up on it. It does come through in your voice, and it resonates with people.
Except when it's like this.
Yeah, that's not
That's not good.
No.
But it genuinely sounds different when you're smiling. I do it all the time.
It absolutely does. It will help you build those relationships and make people say yes next time they want to spend the time with you. That last point is the one I want to emphasize so much on the nose, because Christina is somebody who I feel like embodies this perfectly. The conversation you're in, there's a ratio. You've got 2 ears, 1 mouth. That's for a reason, okay? Listening and being completely in tune with what that person's communicating to you, verbally, emotionally, body language, the whole thing, is what you are trying to tune into. That is going to be what makes you memorable, in addition to whatever else you tell them, to her point about saying, hey, I know they had a child who had cancer, I can help you solve that in 15 minutes. It's also going to be your ability to have them walk away feeling like, wow, they really were caring about what I had to say. They really listened to me. That will make a huge difference. Thank you for letting me interrupt.
Yeah. When I train new team members and they're going to their first event or first conference or whatever it is, I'm always like, you will listen 80% of the time. It wasn't the ratio that Eric said. I always say, you listen 80% of the time and you talk 20. And it's going to be painful. Whether you're on the phone with a client, like in a sales call, that's how I trained salespeople. It was like, nope, you need to give concise, information, but your job is to listen 80% of the time. Because selling is not about bulldozing somebody into a decision. So when we're building relationships with hospitals, as customers, this is not just one check. Like we might be talking with, say, the oncology department, but we know that in the next 6 to 18 months, we want to also sell to med-surg and orthopedics. So guess what? I better not just like bulldoze that person into a decision. I better make them feel really good about their decision. And the way they feel good about decisions is when they feel heard and that their needs are being met. And that's how they feel good about it. So the listening is so important. And it never stops. As a healthcare company, when the pandemic hit, we had to listen harder than ever about how things were changing every day for nurses, or every day for how hospitals viewed surgery. It was a thing that if you ever stop listening as a company, your relationships are dying. That was really dark, sorry. Okay, so it's one thing to get out and to meet people. The kiss of death is if you do not maintain the relationships, because you will not get to reap the benefits of building those relationships. So for example, I go to an investor event, I made a bunch of investors, and then I don't follow up until the next time I'm raising a round. They're gonna be like, who is that? It's like cold outreach again. They don't remember me. They don't have a relationship with me. So if I follow up with my little notes on their business card and send them an email, and maybe I'm not raising right then, but I know in 6 months I'm going to launch a round. So I say, here, hey, just wanted to say it was great to meet you, and if it's cool, I'll add you to our updates list. It's a group email I send out, supposed to be quarterly, but like periodically. Hey, would you like to be on that? If not, cool, no worries. I'll just, great to meet you. 100% of the time they have said, yeah, add me to the updates list. That would be great. And so the difference between group updates and one-on-one attention, like if I'm raising though in that moment, that follow-up to that investor is like, here's a link to my calendar. Here's attached my little teaser deck. I know that you're only 1/3 of the way through your fund 2, and that you have a goal of like investing in X number of companies this year. We're raising now. Let's have an introductory conversation. And then maintaining that relationship, and it's never one well, sometimes it's one, but usually not. It's usually a series of one-on-one interactions with that investor over a period of time. They don't make a decision on you often. Well, they might make a no right away, but they don't make a yes quickly usually. So that is the difference. Like, what are we prioritizing right now? In the future I'll fundraise versus I'm fundraising now. So prioritizing those relationships is really important, and being mindful of that. So whether you're going into an event or you're targeting events that you should go to, those are the things that you need to be mindful of. And then the most important thing, I think, is being respectful in that relationship management. I get requests all the time. Because at some point, so the relationship network I'm building is obviously for my benefit and the benefit of my company. But at some point, you've built it up so well that it becomes valuable to other people. And you start getting requests all the time. Hey, can you introduce me to so-and-so? Or hey, can you, And if I have not maintained those relationships, it is so embarrassing to be like, I can't really reach out to that person. It was, I have no idea where I met them. Or I haven't kept in touch with them for 3 years. So that intro is not going to carry any weight from me. The other thing is if you, being respectful is also about, hey, I know this person, I've maintained a relationship with them, and somebody has asked me for an introduction to them, so I don't just cold send an introduction. I email that person first and say, hey. And this happens a lot for our investors. I am always emailing our investors and be like, hey, this company wants an introduction. Here's their blurb, here's a link to their website. Are you willing to have me introduce you? It's a little extra work, but it is so worth it in terms of the payout, because I'm seen as a person that is respectful in our relationship, and they are more likely to follow through with requests than if I constantly am barraging, for example, my investors with rando introductions to other startups. Maybe they want it, but maybe they're not investing right now. Or maybe they've got a full pipeline and they just literally can't handle one more meeting this week. Or maybe they are having personal issues. Like, you need to be really respectful of the relationships that you do build.
So to that notion of what Christina's talking about with being respectful of time, that is everyone's most precious resource. It's not their treasure, it's not anything else, it's their time. It's the most finite thing that we all have to distribute and give away. So use it properly in your relationships, and it will come back to serve you properly. How can you do that? Well, after you meet somebody, or in the midst of meeting somebody, set that expectation for what your follow-up's gonna be, okay? You're at the conference, you're talking to them, oh, it's so wonderful to meet you, Christina, by the way. Oh, absolutely. And I would love to send you a note about XYZ. Is that okay if I do that to you next week? Oh, you're swamped next week? No problem. Next month?
Give me a couple weeks.
Couple weeks? Sure, no problem. I don't have to remind you. I'll go ahead and send it to you. You don't have to think about it, okay? Awesome. Pleasure. Catch you later. Manners, manners, manners. Please. Thank you. Means so much to me. In the email, in person, all of that. I promise you, it will distinguish you. It will make you memorable. That is your goal, to not blend in with the rest of everything else that's going on in their world, with the rest of all the other people who are trying to get their time, treasure, and other resources, okay? Be prompt and personal and think ahead. And what I mean by think ahead is when I send her that note, I recall from that conversation, or I wrote it on the business card, that she needs interns, she needs help, she needs talent, right? So I'm not gonna just send her the note and saying, hey, Christina, I know we talked about whatever last month, and you talked about needing talent. Do you still need talent? I'm going to make the assumption she still needs talent. I'm going to send her a link to the spreadsheet of all the names that I have to distribute to her of talented individuals within my realm, within my company, whatever it is, so that she doesn't have to then send me a follow-up email asking for it. Always look for opportunities to condense the time that someone has to spend going back and forth with you. Again, it will make you memorable. Lastly, on that last point, when I invited Christina to come here today, she was so gracious to say yes. Maybe, I don't know, we'll have to ask her. One of the reasons she did is because I made it easy for her to say yes by saying, hey, we've got a prescribed template. All you got to do is fill in a couple of the slides. It'll take less than 20 minutes. I'll do it with you. Is that true? Was it easy, yes?
Dramatic pause. It was true.
Oh, amazing. Thank you for the validation. Okay, I'll step out of the way now.
That is really important. And this is whether it's relationship building or sales. It's making it easy for people to respond in the positive to you. So you're building your network. You've got your ecosystem map. You're understanding where you're building relationships. One of the key areas that I really wanted to talk about is I've made a ton of mistakes in hiring, building out our team. And it's not necessarily those people's fault, but it is like my inexperience in some ways coming through with that. So at first, when you're looking to build out the team, it's exciting. People get excited about what you're doing, especially, people who are passionate about the problem you're solving will come to you and be like, oh, is there a way I can help? And if you don't have a structured answer for that, then you really shouldn't say yeah, because then you just get a bunch of people pestering you about what can I do, what can I do? And if you don't, and that really puts a lot of mental burden. But when you're seeking team members, it's early, it's easy to be like, oh, that person is so excited and they seem really energetic and they seem really interested and good. Let's give them a shot. And it's also often a financial decision is a problem for early stage companies. And so you maybe can't pay top dollar for the most experience. So we made a lot of mistakes early on. So this is my famous textbook definition sales hiring mistake. I thought I was super brilliant. I was paying attention. We knew we needed help with sales. I had done the first 3 sales, but again, I knew we needed to mature that experience through hires, not through me becoming a professional salesperson. So I had kept in touch with what was going on in the area. There was a big company that had gone through a bunch of layoffs with sales, and part of that was salespeople. They had merged with another company, and their sales division was cut. And I was like, oh, this is my chance. I can't afford to pay those people's salaries, but I'm going to approach them. I'm going to look on LinkedIn, I'm going to approach them, and I'm going to offer, hey, I know you're looking for another top dollar salary somewhere, but while you're looking, I'll give you a job title that'll help you advance in your career, and you do sales for me for free, except you'll get a commission. Whatever you sell, you get a super high commission, and you get this job title, so there's no gap in your employment history. And then you'll move on because this isn't the thing, but you're going to teach me how to do sales. I thought that was a brilliant plan. Does that sound like a good plan? Like, that sounds super smart. It was the worst plan anyone had ever thought of, because people who work in corporate worlds that are super senior and had just gotten laid off, those are people who are used to having a team of 20 people beneath them. They don't actually do any of the real legwork anymore. And like in startups, I like to say, like, anything, whether it's tech or sales or whatever, you've got to be full stack. Like, you have to do everything from like sourcing leads, moving them from marketing qualified leads to sales qualified leads. You've got to like move them down the sales pipeline and do everything. Create, sales assets like one-pagers and videos. Do you think that these senior executives with lots of sales experience could do any of that? Zero. They couldn't even source leads anymore. They hadn't done it in 20 years. So I literally had to fire somebody that I wasn't paying a salary to because it was like terrible. It was the worst decision ever. So when I was thinking about like how to build the team, early on we hired like passionate people who could give time, people who were good like at knowing what to do but could be flexible in doing lots of different tasks. But at some point, and pretty early on, I was like, we have to mature our team. Investors are asking a lot of questions about the team. They're asking a lot of questions about, our engineer is like only 2 years out of school, and he's the lead engineer, and we have, an artist with some experience, but we don't have anyone with a lot of healthcare experience. So one of the hires I made recently was like someone with 20 years experience in a patient engagement tech company. And we specifically set out to find people with more connections in healthcare than we had. And that person can now, I didn't have to train them as completely. They had to learn SpellBound specific stuff, but they did not have to go through a big process to like understand the healthcare market or what it means to talk to a doctor on a phone. And so this person has brought tons of connections. And in the last year, we've gotten like probably about 6 new hospitals in the door, only because, hey, I have a buddy that works there. Or I know the chief nursing officer. I'll make a call. So it was super valuable at some point to stop relying on your own network and start hiring in relationship networks. So this is our ecosystem. Again, the slide I showed you at the very beginning. Could be filled out better. This is what it looked like when we first started. This was in the first year of the business. We figured out that we really need to do customer discovery. If we're selling into a hospital, I don't even know what a workflow around pain management is. Who are the roles that are involved? What are their pain points? So doing customer discovery was a priority for us as a company as we were building out our product. So we prioritized those types of relationships. I'm not even trying to sell to you. I just want to know, you're a nurse. Tell me how hard it is to get a child to hold still during painful procedures or like catheterizations or something like that. Tell me what you actually do in a day, and how do you solve that problem when the kid who has cerebral palsy starts kicking and screaming because they have needle trauma and they have to get injections in their leg every week. Like, what do you do? So we prioritize those type of relationships. I'm not even trying to sell to you. I just want to learn from you. And a lot of people who are subject matter experts are super willing to share their knowledge. They're proud. They worked really hard to build that knowledge. They don't want to talk to a salesperson. The second is I needed money. I didn't have any money. It was me, and I'm quickly become a bottleneck to progressing because I can't afford to build out the team. I really also started prioritizing relationships with local high net worth individuals who could be angels, angel investors in my company, economic development organizations like Spark downtown, they're well connected, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, MEDC, that's another one, and accelerators. Some accelerators, some of the ones that we did, gave us money. So I was looking for a variety of sources of money. We did raise an early seed round, a pre-seed round. It was only it was under $200,000, like $185,000 we raised. We called it a pre-seed round. We had gotten one investor in and an angel. And we had closed a bunch of deals. And I was waiting for, I had a PO, I had an order from a hospital that was supposed to be paying us. And usually hospitals are pretty punctual when they pay. And in this case, the hospital was delayed in their payment. And so I was like, shit, we have 30 days of runway left. What do I do with my 30 days? I can't open up an investment round. Like, what am I going to do? So I called up somebody in the economic development sphere, and I said, someone who I'd maintained a nice, pleasant relationship with, I said, I really need your help. We have 30 days of runway, but we have a PO in hand. We have an order and a signed legal contract. They'd already paid us 2/3 of the money. We're waiting on $175,000. It should be here in 60 days. Do you know any high net worth individual who is willing to loan us X amount of dollars that we need to cover us for the next 60 days? Like, that was a painful ask for me. But if I had not maintained that relationship, then I would not have got the outcome that I did. And he said, let me think about it. Called me back 2 hours later and said, I have someone who will meet with you. And on that referral, that person literally cut me a check that day and gave really friendly terms on repayment and essentially saved our company. The money from the hospital came through. It was an easier decision because we actually had money coming through, right? It was lowering the risk. But it was a case where I was like, I cannot find, where do I focus my time in the next 30 days to find this amount of money to save the company? It was my relationships that I had, that they went to work for me. And then, of course, I mentioned this earlier, I had no idea what I was doing. So I was focusing on building relationships with people who knew how to do financial models. I was focusing on relationships with people who knew how to do sales. I didn't know how to do those things. I knew how to design a product. And so I really was trying to gap fill a lot. But I also needed to really have mentors around me to help me become a better leader, a better decision maker, and other founders. Like, it's a total cliche, but it's true. Like, being a founder, it's super lonely. And combined with, like, you don't know shit, it's a problem. So, like, when I joined, I purposely got a working space at Spark, and there were other startups there, and I'll never forget, like, when I was raising my first seed round, I was like, hey, I don't even know. I'm getting some weird, like, I had a term sheet, and then suddenly I'm getting a side letter, and it's weird. What does this mean? And like, other founders were the ones that said to me, don't sign that. This is a trap. This is a problem. This is a bad term. And if you sign that, future investors will never look at you again. Or don't take money from that person. They are a problem. They will require high attention, to be very demanding, whatever the reason is, right? Like, don't do this, or here's an example of our term sheet. And it was actually, I was so grateful. So I could go back, and I negotiated with that investor who had started giving these side letters, frankly thinking that they could push me around into signing terms that were going to be damaging to the company long term. So those relationships I had built with other founders, some of them behind me, some of them ahead, were some of the most important relationships that I had for the success of the company early on. Oh, and I needed help, but we're out of time, so we already talked about this. So my ecosystem today is very different. We get money we've had VCs invest in us. This last 2 years, we've raised $2.5 million from the government in non-dilutive funds, which is great, because you don't have to give up equity to your company. And we continue to use some of the other relationships and build on them, but as well as, we need to become HIPAA compliant. I need to know more consultants in the compliance world or security world. I don't have connections there. So knowing that in the next year we need to have reimbursement codes from insurance companies and be HIPAA compliant is like, we have to start now building those relationships and learning. So it'll change over time, your ecosystem and where you spend your time. But the more effort you put in now to the relationships you are building, down the road, those relationships will start doing work for you. It'll save you time. It'll bring you more success faster, and so it's the most worthwhile investment you can make.
Could not agree more. And to end on that point, I want to make one more. That time, doing the early work now, I think I mentioned this to y'all before, you are a charity while you are here. While you are students, everyone wants to help you. Everyone wants to see you succeed. Now is your time to build that network and make those asks, because now is the time where you are best perceived as a conduit for someone to help. Have a great weekend, everybody.